It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
One more time, I politely ask, can you play Frank for us? For those walking out of Yankee Stadium, Queens, sing New York, New York. Enjoy yourself. Actually, screw it. Don't even sing New York, New York. Sing the hit single, Oh My God. Oh my God. The New York Mets have completed a sweep. That's right, a sweep of the New York Yankees. And when I say sweep, I don't mean winning back-to-back games in the Bronx, which is cool. When I say sweep, I don't mean the New York Mets destroying the Yankees by hitting 5 home runs and winning 12-3. I mean sweeping them. I mean for just the second time in the history of the Subway Series, the New York Mets won every single regular season game against the New York Yankees. And I want to start there before we get into how they destroyed Garrett Cole, before we get into the feel good that we all have being 5 games above 500. Can we as Met fans just understand, take a deep breath and realize that beating the New York Yankees, humiliating the New York Yankees, sweeping the New York Yankees, we don't do that. That's not something we normally do. I mean, that's not in our history. Like, I think back to the Subway Series, whether it's from the very beginning in 1997, whether it's the World Series Battle of 2000, whether it's Roger Clemens beating Mike Piazza in the head, whether it's Luis Castillo dropping a freaking pop-up. Most of my Subway Series memories, most of our Subway Series memories, they're humiliating. They're bad. So while I understand the Yankees have issues, which we'll discuss on WFAN, I ain't discussing it here because, quite frankly, here at Rico Brogna, we don't give a rat's ass that the Yankees have issues. We don't, okay? That's for 2 o'clock on the Fan tomorrow. But can we cherish the fact, think about the fact, that the New York Mets have destroyed the New York Yankees, and we never do that. This is just the second time in the history of the Subway Series that the New York Mets have done this, and that's swept the Yankees. And the other time they did it was back in 2013. And what I remember so vividly about sweeping the Yankees in 2013 was how hollow it was. If you guys remember that, it was 4 games in a row, 2 at Citi Field, and then 2 at Yankee Stadium. So you could argue maybe it's more of a sweep because there were 4 straight games. The Mets stunk that year. In fact, going into that 4-game series, the Mets were 11 games under 500. And while I was excited that they won the 4 games, I don't know if you can go back and listen to the archives of Beningo and Roberts from 2013, but I could tell you, I remember coming on the air saying, you know what, Joe, who gives a crap? We suck. Yeah, great. We beat the Yankees. We're not any good. And so I remember having a very tough time. Plus, I got dumped by a girl right around that time. That may have that may have had something to do with it. But I remember not being able to enjoy what we did to the New York Yankees during that 4-game sweep. And maybe I'm not alone. We can enjoy this. See, this we can enjoy. And I'll tell you a few reasons why. Number one, the New York Mets today beat up, tarred, feathered, destroyed, beat the crap out of one of the best pitchers in baseball. You know, yesterday, after the Mets beat the Yankees, and I didn't give a rat's ass about this, I got messages from some of my friends who are Yankee fans, and they tried to tell me, well, this was a punt lineup. They couldn't win with this lineup, blah, 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 blah. And I took it. I didn't care because, quite frankly, the Mets won, so what the hell do I care if your lineup sucked? Today, in this game, the New York Mets went up against Garrett Cole, who is starting to figure it out and starting to look like healthy Garrett Cole, right? Dominant Garrett Cole. And the New York Mets, after looking meek for the first 8 hitters of this game and being down 1-0, let's think about how we felt about 3 hours ago if you're listening live. Garrett Cole retires the first 8 batters. Gleyber Torres hits a leadoff home run off Sean Manaea. And let's be honest, we probably think, all right, this is just going to be a loss. Not the end of the world. Garrett Cole's going to dominate. He's due to pitch well against the Mets. It is what it is. Take a split. I even said a few days ago on the Rico, give me a split. I'd be happy with it. And then Tyrone Taylor, who shouldn't have even been in the lineup. When that lineup was announced on the Fan, I didn't know that Bader had a minor injury. So I was like, what is Mendy doing? Like, why is Tyrone Taylor in the lineup over Harrison Bader? Bader had success against Garrett Cole a few weeks ago. So Tyrone Taylor's only in the lineup because of an injury. And what does he do? He uncorks a bomb of a home run. And if that wasn't enough, Pete Alonso, and by the way, you tell me, clutch or not clutch? I don't know. Is that the clutch home run? That 2-run shot in the fourth? But you see Pete Alonso uncork a 2-run home run. You see Francisco Lindor hit the first of 2 home runs. And you see the Mets take Garrett Cole to the woodshed and whip that ass. And I can't explain it, but for whatever reason, the New York Mets, you could change who's on the team. You can change who's in the lineup. You can change everything about who the Mets are. They seem to own Garrett Cole. And that's a damn good feeling. That's a damn good feeling, especially when Sean Manaea gives up a home run to Gleyber Torres to start the game and then gives up an absolute bomb to Juan Soto ahead in the count in the 3rd inning that takes that 1-1 game after Tyrone Taylor hit a home run and flushes it down the toilet. And so the excuses, they're gone. Because you could tell me whatever you want about this Yankee lineup and how crappy it is, and that's fine. Again, we don't care. Here's what we know. And this has been the story of the Mets over the last month or so. They don't only score runs, they beat the crap out of good pitching. And Garrett Cole is a damn good pitcher, and the Mets decided to take him to the woodshed as he gave up 3 home runs. And should have been 4. Jeff McNeil came very, very close to a home run in the 2nd inning, but Juan Soto made that leaping catch. This was very satisfying. To see this offense absolutely beat up the immortal Garrett Cole. Just whip them all over the place. I mean, if you're a Met fan tonight or this morning, depending on when you are listening to the Rico, I know maybe you get a little irrational. Maybe I get a little irrational when the Mets beat the Yankees. There's that local rivalry. There's that local feel, especially when you're in the building. I was for game 1. Many of you were for game 2. But man, does this feel good. And man, does it make you almost look at those first 4 games against Miami in the second half of the year and take a big, deep breath and say, okay, this team's legitimately good. The Mets have been legitimately good for a while. And after winning these 2 games against the Yankees and making it 4-0 against them, the Mets are a season high 5 games above 500. They are a game and a half behind the Atlanta Braves. Let that sink in. A game and a half behind the Atlanta Braves going into a 4-game series that we will discuss a little bit later on in this, Rico. But we need to begin and continue to enjoy whipping that Yankee ass all over the Bronx. Now, let me say this about Sean Manaea. Sean Manaea, I thought, did a fine job until he couldn't finish the 5th inning. He gives up the leadoff home run to Gleyber Torres. He hits Austin Wells and then commits the bad throwing error that gave the Yankees a runner in scoring position. But kudos to Sean Manaea. He got a big strike out of Anthony Volpe. Kudos to Sean Manaea. He got a big double play against DJ LeMahieu. And even though he gives up the home run to Juan Soto, he got Aaron Judge out a couple of times. He got into trouble in the 4th inning and he worked out of it. And his pitch count was so high that I looked at the bottom of the 5th inning, especially at that point with a 5-2 lead. And I said, just get me through the 5th inning. 5 innings, 2 runs, we'll take it. It's not the greatest thing in the world, but we'll take it. And I don't know what the hell happened in the 5th inning. You have yourselves a 3-run lead. And this is why, depending on where you are in a game, depending on the score in the game, that's how you got to decide how aggressive you want to be handling Soto and Judge. Now, quite frankly, we don't have to have this discussion again because the Mets aren't playing the Yankees again unless we see them in the World Series. Fat chance of that. But when Soto comes up with 2 outs and nobody on in the 5th inning and you have a 3-run lead, you got to freaking attack him. And for whatever reason, 3rd time around the batting order with a high pitch count, this is where Sean Manaea kind of ruined his night. It went from, hey, that's an acceptable performance, to you got to be freaking kidding me. He walks Juan Soto on 4 pitches. He drills Aaron Judge. Again, you've got a 3-run lead. This is not the moment to do it. And then after a hard-fought battle with Austin Wells, he walks him. And this was a key moment in the game because I agree with the way the Mendy managed that 5th inning. I'm mad at Manaea. He didn't get the job done. So, look, sometimes I don't like what Mendy does. Sometimes we don't like what the manager does. And sometimes I do, and it comes down to the player not executing. Sean Manaea with a 3-run lead cannot walk Juan Soto on 4 pitches. He cannot hit Aaron Judge, and he can't lose that battle to Austin Wells. Once he does, clearly, win be damned, a pitch count of 103 for, of all people, Sean Manaea, you got to get his ass out the game. And he did. And he goes to Adam Ottavino. And quite frankly, I can't even rip it. Because as much as everybody can't stand Adam Ottavino, let me ask you a question. Who the hell else do you want in this game? It's the 5th inning. It's a 3-run game. The tying runs at the plate. I mean, go through your choices. You're not going to a lefty against Anthony Volpe. You're not. I guess you could, but why would you? So your choices are Adrian Hauser, no thanks. Phil Maton, who may not have been available in this game. Jose Muto, which, again, I'm not even sure if he was going to be available in this game, considering how much he threw a few days earlier. Obviously not Edwin Diaz. Obviously not Dednil Nunez. So you really don't have any other option but Adam Ottavino. And look, sometimes we got to give the guys that drive us nuts credit, much like Big Jake Diekman the other night, striking out Aaron Judge. Adam Ottavino comes into a bases-loaded jam, and he makes a very, very big pitch against Anthony Volpe, getting him to turn one over and ground out to Mark Vientos. So huge moment there for Adam Ottavino. Danny Young. Look, kudos to Danny Young coming in and pitching a clean inning, helped out by a brilliant defensive play by Tyrone Taylor. A very that's baseball Susan kind of moment. The fact that Tyrone Taylor's making all these plays. Meanwhile, he shouldn't have even been in this lineup. Young overcomes the error he makes, gets the big strikeout of Gleyber Torres, and then you see this Met offense continue to pile on. Mark Vientos goes deep in the 8th inning. The Mets really pile it on in the 8th inning. Jeff McNeil strokes his 2nd double of the game. They get helped out by the bad defense by Oswaldo Cabrera making the bad throw home. Francisco Lindor hits another bomb of a home run, a 3-run shot. And so at that point, we're not even freaking out about this bullpen. And it's huge to get that kind of rest for some of your key arms because the Mets are about to embark on, you thought this was a fun series. You thought this was a big series. This Atlanta series is a lot bigger. That's just the reality. And again, we'll get to that a little bit later on. This is going to be an extended Rico. We're not doing 15 minutes like I'm driving home because quite frankly, driving home with a hoarse voice, dealing with a bunch of maniacs driving, it's a little bit different. So we'll give you a little fuller Rico if you want to hang in there. But the offense continues to pummel them. And that was so good to see because over the first 5 games coming out of the All-Star break, the Mets may have won 3 of them, but they were fortunate. So many issues with runners in scoring position. Not tonight. Not tonight. Not Tyrone Taylor coming through with an RBI single in the 6th inning that knocked Garrett Cole out of the game. No, no, no. Not all the base hits in the 8th inning that really piled it on. This was an A-plus offensive effort from top to bottom. Pete Alonso. We did that little home run feature on Pete. You got to admit, 2-run home run in the 4th inning in a game where they're trailing 2-1. I think that'll qualify as a big home run. And Pete had a hell of a series. He got on base twice in this game. He had 2 hits in the first game. Now, granted, they were with nobody on base, but he did hit that home run with J.D. Martinez on first, so that was very encouraging. They've also broke out with Brandon Nimmo in a massive slump. I think going back to the Miami series, Nimmo's 0 for his last 13. And then you have Jeff McNeil. Let's address Jeff McNeil because I don't want to tell you that batting champion Jeff McNeil is back. I can't necessarily say that's the case. And I'm not even telling you he's turning into Daniel Murphy or he's figured everything out, even if his new approach is, let me hit the ball as hard as I possibly can. But the reality, and this is what I was saying the other day about him, the reality is they need him. Without an everyday right fielder, and who knows about Starling Marte, and even like with Iglesias, I love Iglesias. Iglesias looks like the heart of the team. He looks like the chemistry builder of this team. Obviously, the OMG thing has been awesome. He's great defensively. He's hit more than anybody could have expected. So obviously, look, we all love Jose Iglesias, and I want him playing every day at second base, and he is. But you have to be on alert that this may not last. Okay? We got to be fair about that. It may not last. So Jeff McNeil is valuable because they need him right now. Do I believe necessarily that he has broken out of it and the last year and a half was an aberration? I don't necessarily believe that. I don't think 6 games is enough to convince me. But what I have right now as a Met fan with Jeff is this cautious optimism and this thought that when you look at the roster and you look at what they're likely not to do at the trade deadline, they're not making big moves. They're not going to add a big bat. They need Jeff McNeil. Let me make that perfectly clear. It doesn't mean he needs to be on the team next year. It doesn't mean you don't consider moving him during the offseason. I'm talking about the here and I'm talking about the now. Speaking of which, Dan writes this email about Jeff McNeil that I want to read now because we can continue to address it, and we'll mix some more of your emails throughout the pod, thericob@gmail.com. Dan writes, I can't believe you're going to let yourself get fooled into wanting to keep Jeff McNeil for the rest of the year. You have confidence in this guy that he's going to keep this up? You're talking about Jeff McNeil carrying this team in the second half, which is literally 6 games old. So now a 6-game sample size is enough for you to say everything we've seen for a year plus is just going to not rear its head again. You can't keep falling for this stuff. And if anyone is offering you good pieces for any spots or need on this team, you have to take it. You can 100% replace him, and I get the versatility aspect, but I really don't think it'll be that hard to replicate the crap numbers this guy has put up for 18 months now. So let me address it. No, I don't have the confidence he's going to keep this up. I'm telling you, though, that they need him in terms of who's playing right field or who's playing second base if Jose Iglesias goes back to being a guy that started the year at AAA. The other thing is good pieces. Can I be specific for a second? I'm going to give you a hypothetical trade. And I do this based on an article I was reading earlier today about the Pittsburgh Pirates. I read that the Pittsburgh Pirates would like to add at the trade deadline. And I admit the Pirates are a complicated team because the Mets and the Pirates are separated by very few games in the standings. So it would seem kind of odd for two teams that are literally competing with each other to make a trade. But I'm giving you a hypothetical. And in this article coming out of Pittsburgh, I read that the Pirates are open to trading one of their surplus pitchers, whether it's a starting pitcher or it's a relief pitcher, to get a bat. So I see that, and I'm like, wait a second. Hold on. Hey. Mets need a reliever. We all know that's their biggest need. And you could argue they could even use a starting pitcher right now with Christian Scott going down, even though he may come back. We'll see about that. But I'm not really in the mood to go out and trade for a surplus starting pitcher. I'd rather deal with what the Mets have as their current options, whether it's Luke Casey or it's McGill or it's Hauser or it's Budo. Not that they're great options, but I'd rather do that. They need a reliever. So I started thinking, all right, how serious are the Pirates about trading a reliever for a bat? Aroldis Chapman? It doesn't do it for me. But Colin Holderman and David Bednar do. So if hypothetically, and again, I'm not telling you that the Pirates would make this trade. I have no idea. But I want to put names to the idea of would you trade a guy or not trade a guy. If the Pittsburgh Pirates called me up, and this is where I'll agree with Dan, and said, hey, guys, we're going to give you David Bednar. We're going to give you our closer. We believe in Colin Holderman. He's a lot cheaper. Bednar makes about $4.5 million this year, and then is going to make more next year with another year of arbitration. And, pay the difference on McNeil, so maybe pay down a little bit. Jeff McNeil for David Bednar. Am I considering a deal like that? Yeah. I don't think that deal's out there. So when we talk about, or Dan talks about, you got to trade him. Well, let me hear the trade, because in a case like that, if you're getting a top-end relief pitcher, you're right. I'll figure out replacing Jeff McNeil. But I don't think that deal is out there. I don't think that deal was ever out there. I think to guys like Dan, they wanted to DFA Jeff McNeil because they were so angry about the way he was playing in the first half of the year, which I was frustrated too. I was never at the DFA point, but I was certainly frustrated. So that's a hypothetical. I don't think that's realistic by any stretch, but I do think that those are going to be kind of the trades that may be out there, that there are so many buyers that you may have to make a buyer for buyer trade. But for now, let Jeff McNeil cook. Let's hope that this sample size of 6 games can turn into something more. As Hoff mentioned yesterday on the Rico, Jeff McNeil is open that he's got a brand new approach. He's trying to hit the crap out of the ball. He's not trying to place it anymore. And one thing we're seeing from Jeff, and I don't love comparing it to Daniel Murphy because I think it creates an expectation that's very unrealistic. Jeff McNeil turning into an MVP candidate. But I am still so stunned about what happened with Murphy. If we ever do like a retro Rico, a little retro offseason Rico, where we talk about decisions the Mets made in the last 10, 15 years, I would tell you, and look, I'm on record. I was on the air with Joe, so you could remember what I said, but I'll tell you what I said. I wanted to keep Murph, but I never thought that what he did in the playoffs was all of a sudden going to be a thing. Never once. And I was wrong. I never thought that a hot few weeks would turn into a guy coming very close to winning the most valuable player award. So I can't imagine that Jeff McNeil turns into that, but we are seeing Jeff hit for a lot more power. 2 extra base hits in the finale of this series, including a ball to right field. Now, granted, it would have been a Yankee Stadium home run, but a ball to deep right field that almost got out. So we are seeing a very different Jeff McNeil right now, until Starling Marte comes back, or until the Mets make some kind of deal for a bat, which I'm not confident they're going to do. The Mets' strongest lineup features McNeil in right, Iglesias at second. Card subject to change, obviously, but that's their strongest lineup. And I'll tell you ahead of time, I haven't looked at the career numbers against Chris Sale, but the Mets are facing Chris Sale on Thursday. I would run McNeil out in right field, even against a tough lefty like Chris Sale. I wouldn't be intimidated by that. Because, look, Jeff McNeil has hit lefties throughout his career. By the way, now I am so curious to see Chris Sale's numbers against Jeff McNeil, just to see if there's anything that jumps out at me, if there's anything that jumps out at us. But they are facing Chris Sale, who the Mets have not faced yet this season. He's had a remarkable season for Atlanta. Here we go. Good, I feel vindicated. Jeff McNeil against Chris Sale, 2 for 3. Not a huge sample size, but not bad. By the way, as I'm looking at this, a lot of interesting info. Jose Iglesias is 11 for 33 against Chris Sale, a 333 batting average. Francisco Lindor is 13 for 31, a 419 batting average. And I mentioned small sample size, but Jeff McNeil is 2 for 3. I'd run him out there every single day in right, and Jose Iglesias every single day at second base. I didn't mind Alvarez being dropped in the order. Look, he's cooled off. He's been a different hitter over the last couple of weeks. He did have that base hit off the wall in the 9th inning. Hopefully that's something he can build on. J.D. Martinez had a couple of hits in this game, including the base hit right before the Pete Alonso home run. So maybe they can get J.D. Martinez going. But man, oh man. Now, a lot of people want to talk about this. I give my producer from the Evan and Tiki show, Tommy Lugauer, a lot of credit, even though he's positive about everything right now. So I don't know how much, credibility he has, but excuse me, I got something falling out of my mouth. What the hell is, cheese from about 2 hours ago. That's disgusting. I apologize. Yeah, it's a piece of cheese that got stuck in my tooth from about 3 hours ago. Anyhow, about a month ago, Loogie started saying, hey, Lindor's an MVP candidate. And what I said to him on the air was, no, he's not, but I want to be fair. If he continues to hit at this torrid pace, if the Mets continue to win games, there could come a point where, yeah, maybe he does enter the MVP conversation. I think it's going to be a lot to ever kind of pass Shohei Ohtani, who's having a remarkable season. I think it'd be very difficult to even pass Bryce Harper now that he's healthy for Philadelphia when you look at the amount of wins the Dodgers and the Phillies are going to have, and then obviously the raw stats. But what I said to him was, while you're wrong, you can eventually be right. Now, Lindor still has a long way to go. But this torrid pace that he's on, he now has 21 home runs, 60 RBIs. He is doing this from the leadoff spot, and OPS over 800. Not only does he deserve an apology from every Met fan that thought he was cooked and every Met fan that said he can't hit left-handed anymore, and that should have already been done. I think the apology should have already been sent, and maybe we shouldn't doubt him next year when he has a bad April. That's just who he is. But I think he is slowly, because it's a process to get into that conversation, but he is slowly moving into that MVP discussion. It is slowly happening. Now, can he keep this pace up for another 3 months? It's asking a lot. Can the Mets continue to rise in the standings? It's asking a lot. But right now, he continues to rise in that discussion. And I don't know about you guys, but the MVP is something special. As a fan of the New York Jets and the Brooklyn Nets and the New York Mets, I haven't seen many MVPs in my life. I thought Jason Kidd got robbed many years ago by Tim Duncan. And with the Mets, they've never come close. I mean, what's the closest a Met has ever come to winning the MVP? Off the top of my head, the answer would be 1988, before my time, but 1988, when Darryl Strawberry and Kevin McReynolds split the vote and Kirk Gibson won the MVP. I mean, other than that, not only have the Mets never had an MVP, they've never come close. Never come close. I think David Wright had a year maybe where he finished in the top 5. So I hate to sound like a lame Hollywood celebrity, but to even have somebody in consideration would be a great honor. But here's the overall point, because awards, whatever. He has been such an incredible catalyst for what this offense has done. And you go back to the top of the first inning of this game, that 9-pitch at-bat against Garrett Cole, I don't know if that turned into something considering Cole retired the next 8 guys, but I love that. I love seeing that from Brandon Nimmo the last couple of years, that long at-bat early in a game. And think about what Lindor did against Garrett Cole after that. A base hit in the 3rd inning, 2-run bomb in the 5th inning. Let's get to some of your emails. The RicoB@gmail.com. We'll preview the Atlanta series, some thoughts about Christian Scott and how the Mets should fill that spot in the rotation. But Billy Belkey writes, just got to watch Francisco, the all-star Lindor, nuke that ball in the 8th. Thought it was a good time to propose a trade. The Mets should try to bring Ahmed Rosario home from the Rays. Would be a huge utility guy with McNeil and Iglesias. I do agree that Ahmed Rosario would be a good fit. I don't think he would cost a lot. I think that a guy that has that kind of versatility, a little bit of speed, not a bad thing, especially when you think about you're facing a tough lefty. Does Rosario make sense as your right fielder? I know we're probably feeling pretty good about Tyrone Taylor and his performance, but overall, I don't think we're going to want Tyrone Taylor necessarily to play every day against a lefty. So I don't think that's a bad target. I don't think he's going to cost a lot. He's on a 1-year deal. He's not making a lot of money. Mark Gray writes, time to wake up. Oh, wait, he says, I have a short poem for Yankee fans. Should we read a short poem for Yankee fans, considering this is the Rico Brogna and not the Mike Gallego?
Yes, please do.
Okay. Hoff says yes. Time to wake up and look through the prism. Besides egg on your face, you'll soon have Chisholm. You must feel foolish, uncertain, in need of a caddy. But don't worry, the Mets are your daddy. Okay. All right, man. There you go. Will writes, Lindor for the MVP. I tried to drown out the sound when the games are on ESPN, but I thought I heard one of the bozos say Lindor is in the MVP race. What say you? LFGM, and let's still add a bat and an arm or 3. Yes, 3 arms would be very nice. You know, like I said with the MVP thing, it's really how you want to parse words. Is he the MVP? No, he's not right now. To me, the MVP is Shohei Ohtani, even though he's a designated hitter, something we've never seen before. But like I said to Loogie, and I will say it here again, if this continues, if he continues this torrid pace. I mean, his OPS over 800. Like, think about the progress he's made over the last 2 months. I can't assume he's going to keep this pace up, but for the sake of this discussion, it is late July. We still have, 2+ months left in the season. If he continues this torrid pace, if the Mets make the playoffs, if the Mets get to 90 wins, I think he can further be in that discussion. But right now, he's a ways away from a guy like Shohei Ohtani. Scott Stern writes, as I look at our reliever usage the past few days and map out the last 4 innings tonight, it's now 6-2 when he sent this email. I can't help but wonder how we're going to function with a 6-man rotation. And that's the case, even assuming we add better relievers the next week. So what Scott is saying, it's a very good point, is that if you have a 6-man rotation, there's a cap on the amount of pitchers you can have on your roster. It's not as if the Mets could have 15 guys on their, in their bullpen. If you're using a 6-man rotation and you have a cap of only 13 pitchers on your roster, which is the rule, that means you only have 7 relievers. Right now, the Mets have 8 relievers. So what he's saying is, even if you've got 6 guys in your rotation, if they're all only going 4 or 5 innings and you have one short in your bullpen, how are you going to function? It's a great question. Look, the 6-man rotation thing is complicated, and it's been complicated because of this injury to Christian Scott. Let's discuss. Number one, what Scott mentioned about being an arm short in the bullpen. That's issue number one. They do have some fresh arms coming back, including Sean Reed-Foley, and I do assume they'll add somebody at the trade deadline. Probably not multiple guys, but at least one guy. But you are going to have 7 bullpen arms as opposed to 8. That's issue number one. Issue number two, who should be in the rotation? Like, I look right now at this rotation, and not that everybody's perfect, but Jose Quintana deserves to be there. Luis Severino deserves to be there. Despite Manaea pissing us off today, deserves to be there. David Peterson deserves to be there. And obviously, Kodai Senga makes his return on Friday night against Atlanta. Now you look at the other options, and let's go through them. Option number one, and Hoff, I want you to vote on this. I'm going to give you the options that are currently in-house, and then you say yay or no. You ready?
Let's go.
Option number one, Jose Budo.
Nay.
And you say nay not because he isn't good enough. He's obviously their best option. It's that he's been so good out of the bullpen.
Exactly. 100%.
So I've given this thought because my first reaction was the same way, Pete. Here's where you can convince me to change my mind. Add 2 relievers at the trade deadline. If you're adding 2 legitimate relievers to go along with Dednell Nunez and Edwin Diaz, and look, Adrian Hauser's in that bullpen as a long man, and Jake Diekman, like him or not, is going to be there as a left-handed reliever. Maybe you get rid of Ottavino, and you feel like, all right, you know what? I've sturdied this bullpen. Jose Budo is your best option in the rotation. So to me, what could convince me of Budo, and this is the way the Mets can add starting pitching depth, is if you add another bullpen arm or 2, and you feel good about this bullpen, which again is going to be 1 arm short because you're going 6-man, then my first choice would be Jose Budo. Would that convince you?
Yeah, but they have to do that work though first before I can commit to that.
Well, but you know what's the great news about this? The Mets don't need to add a 6th starter. I mean, if you really want to get technical about this, until Wednesday, because they could keep everybody on their normal rest outside of Senga. Senga's the one guy that you don't want pitching on regular rest, right? That's Wednesday. So technically, that's after the trade deadline. So the timing of this could potentially work out. Okay, so we're on the same page with Jose Budo. He's their best option, but you can't do it unless you add an arm or 2 out of the bullpen.
I agree.
All right, option number 2, Adrian Hauser.
No. Not even, don't have to think twice about that one. No chance.
Adrian Hauser will remain long man out of bullpen. All right. Option number 3, Tylor Megill.
No.
Now, for the record with Tylor Megill, I checked in on him in the minor leagues because Tylor Megill is in the minor leagues pitching. He's made 3 starts in the minor league since he's been optioned down, and it is so typical of Tylor Megill. Like, if I gave you his pitching lines, you would say, oh, my God, That's exactly what we would see in the major league level. His first start back on July 5th against Worcester, 3 1/3 innings, 2 runs, 7 strikeouts, 5 walks. He threw 88 pitches. So not a good one. He gets knocked out in the 4th inning. He walks 5 guys. His next start against Scranton, the Yankees minor league affiliate, 5 innings, 4 runs, 6 strikeouts, 2 walks, 88 pitches. Again, very typical. 5 innings, 4 runs. Like, it's not great. It keeps you in the game, but it's not good enough. And his last start, actually a pretty good start, but you'll see the negative against Rochester. 5 innings, 1 run unearned, but he walked 4 guys, and he threw 85 pitches in 5 innings. How typical is that of Tyler McGill, even at AAA, to be your typical 5-inning between 2 and 4 runs and walk a bunch of guys?
I mean, you know what you could do with Tyler McGill? You should tag him with Brett Beatty and go get me the best bullpen arm out there or a starting pitcher. Like that's what you do with those 2 guys. You don't need to have them here. You don't have to do that with McGill. You don't have to bring McGill up. Use him as trade bait.
Yeah, I'm not sure if he has the value you hope he has, but I do understand the point. Joey Lucchesi was actually pitching relatively well at AAA in his last 2 starts, but he hasn't started since July 4th. Remember, the Mets DFA'd him, and then they brought him back. He's actually on the Mets minor league roster. They would have to add him to the 40-man roster. Am I forgetting anybody? Like, those are the options. I'm trying to think if there's anybody else that I'm forgetting. I mean, certainly from the 40-man, I'm not forgetting anybody, but those are right now the realistic in-house options if the Mets want to go to a 6-man rotation, and you can kind of feel it and hear it. They're not great options. I mean, they're just not amazing options, and I don't think sticking with a 5-man's an option because of the Tyler McGill situation. Like, you're not going to do that to him, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, unless you want to try to, press one of these young kids that are having a decent season in the minors, and again, you have to create room on the 40-man to even get them to be called up. But I mean, that's the only thing you could do. And then you'd be like, hey, do we have lightning in a bottle with this kid right here? Like, where Christian Scott could have been that guy. And he's injured right now. And again, who knows when he'll be back, whatever. But he wasn't the guy anyway. When somebody asked me early on when he got called up, do you imagine him being in the playoff rotation? I said, no.
Christian Scott? No, I mean, he has a lot to prove. And by the way,
Exactly.
So speaking of Christian Scott, actually one last thing before we get to Christian Scott, the only young pitcher that maybe you give a little bit of thought to, and the only reason I bring this up is when they called up Christian Scott, I was surprised to begin with. I didn't actually think they were going to call him up as quickly as they did, is Brandon Sprout. Now, he's at AA, so it would be a big jump, but he's got great numbers at AA. He also started the year in Brooklyn, so you're talking about a kid that was in single A and AA. The kid was in college a year ago, so it'd be a very, very big and quick jump for Brandon Sprout to already be here, but that's just another guy to keep in mind. I think I'm going to guess, honestly, if I had to guess right now, I think it's going to end up being Jose Butto, because I do think that as well as he's pitched out of the bullpen, if they add a arm, doesn't even have to be multiple. Let's say they add one solid reliever. I think to go along with Sean Reed-Foley, the potential return of Reed Garrett, who apparently is not that far away, and Dednil Nunez, I think the Mets would convince themselves, you know what? There you go. There's our bullpen. And let's move Butto back into the rotation. And look, I go back and forth in terms of the importance of it, because as bad as this bullpen is and as valuable as Butto feels right now, and he does, again, I'm talking about a world in which, you're adding Sean Reed-Foley, you're adding a hypothetical reliever in a trade, maybe you're getting Reed Garrett back from injury. Like, all of a sudden now you're looking at a bullpen that features more options. You are talking about a starting pitcher, and that guy's pitching once every 6 days. And those options of Adrian Hauser and Tyler McGill, or, adding Joey Lucchesi back to the 40-man roster, those are not ideal options. And Butto was good when he was pitching in the rotation. So I do think that is the best case scenario. Now, as far as Christian Scott's concerned, let me get to him. Thank God he doesn't need Tommy John. But the fact it is a UCL injury is very, very concerning. What I wonder about with Scott, because right now the plan is he's going to rest for 2 weeks. When he comes back, does he become a bullpen option? Do the Mets think of this and say, you know what, young pitcher, we're not going to pitch him on back-to-back days, but maybe to lighten the workload, because we don't want to throw him a lot of innings. Maybe he can be useful for us by using him out of the bullpen. Just something to keep an eye on. Now, let's get back to some of your emails. Merck writes, what are your thoughts on a Pete Alonso Juan Soto swap? Personally, I'm not in favor. I think we should keep Pete, but the idea crossed my mind since they're both represented by Scott Boras. Yankees need a first baseman, and Pete's price will be lower than Soto's. Plus, I've heard Soto's best career numbers are at Citi Field. That's Mercedes. So I think Mercedes is talking about the offseason, not a trade, because obviously the Yankees are not trading Juan Soto. That's crazy. The Mets are not trading Pete Alonso. Look, I love Pete Alonso. He's a homegrown Met. I would be thrilled for him to hit 500 home runs as a Met, but I'm also not a complete idiot. Sometimes I may be a complete idiot. Sometimes I get very emotional, and I admit that. If you are telling me, and I hate to do the offseason thing, but I'm reading Mercedes' email, first-time emailer, I want to be nice. If you're telling me the Mets will lose Pete Alonso, lifelong Met, devastating, all that, the beard, yes, but they're replacing him with a generational offensive player like Juan Soto, I think I would have to accept that. I think I would have to be okay with that. But that's for November. Though I did see Pete Hoffman tweet, the Mets don't need Juan Soto. Did you tweet that earlier today?
I did. I said that and they don't.
Every team needs Juan Soto. He's a generational hitter who's 26 years old. Stop it.
But they don't need him. Here's why. Because they are more balanced than we want to give them credit for. In the past, I'd say, yeah, dude, like let's bring in somebody that is that explosive. That's amazing. But the Mets can still have a successful offseason and not get Juan Soto.
Those are two different things, by the way. You know, obviously, yeah, the Mets can build a functional baseball team. They already have. They're in a wild card spot and be really good without getting Juan Soto. It's not the end-all, be-all. Like the idea that they need to sign him, no one's saying that, but you should want to sign him because he's a great player. And think about this for Juan Soto. Never beat the New York Mets as a New York Yankee. Think about that for Juan. That I throw that in if I'm David Stern when I get a meeting with him during the offseason.
Well, that's what I said. I was like, dude, not for nothing, though. He will be a Met anyway because he's going to want the money, and the Mets will definitely be the highest bidder. And the Mets are the better team. Let's be fair.
Well, right now they're the better team. They've been the better team for a month. Look, overall record still matters, but yes, the Mets have been a better team. And here's what's crazy about the Mets and the Yankees when you think about them. And this never felt realistic, even when you try to be optimistic about their turnaround. The Mets are right there for the first wild card spot, which is kind of crazy to think about. We're sitting here a few weeks ago looking at the third wild card spot and looking at, hey, they're still in it. Oh, they're alive. Third wild card spot. I've even heard people diminish it. Say, who cares? It doesn't matter, which is foolish. They are now a game and a half from the top wild card spot, which would mean a wild card series hosted in your building. Now, we learned 2 years ago that's not the end-all be-all, but you'd still prefer it to be in your own building. Mike Caputo writes, Mike from Franklin Square, as fans, we often talk about how the Mets pitchers do not stand up for their hitters after they've been beat. I believe Sean Manaea had Austin Wells on purpose in the first inning. The Yankees hit 3 Mets during the second game of the Citi Field set, the game in which Manaea started. While I do not condone hitting players on purpose, I believe it should be recognized. I did not think of that for a second. I didn't. Now, that doesn't mean Mike's wrong. Let me go back on my scorecard. I got to go back to the series at Citi Field. Did they hit multiple Mets in the game Sean Manaea started? I believe him. I don't think he's making it up. I got to be honest with you. I don't remember it. Now, let's see. So Sean Manaea pitched 5 scoreless innings against the Yankees back in late June, exactly 1 month ago. And J.D. Martinez got hit in the first inning of this game. And then later in the game, Pete Alonso got hit by Yandres Gomez. That's a good pull. I don't know if it was on purpose, but that's a good pull. The only reason I question if it's on purpose or not, I'll walk you through this. So Gleyber hits the home run. It's 1-0 Yankees. Soto is up. No on, nobody out. If you want to hit somebody, aren't you hitting one of their better players? If you don't want to hit Soto after you got Soto out, you could hit Aaron Judge. Like, there were ample opportunities. In fact, Aaron Judge came to the plate in the third inning right after Juan Soto hit a home run. So you could hit him. I just find it surprising and odd that the person you would pick to hit would be Austin Wells, with all due respect to Austin Wells. Is that the guy
Well,
you're going to drill?
Well, he was the cleanup hitter. I mean, he was, right?
Yes, he was the cleanup hitter. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, you take the best man out. By the way, can I play you an email when I have a chance? Not
Yes.
email, voicemail when you have a chance?
Yes.
All right. Listen, this is from right after the game. We have a caller that called in. So let's take a listen.
Gentlemen, Hoff, Evan, it's Michael, Oregon's biggest Mets fan out here where the sun is still shining, and it's shining on those amazing New York Mets. This is the lineup that we wanted, top to bottom. It's time to get a little bit of bullpen help. I say you kill two birds with one stone, okay? Two birds with one stone. Get Ma, the left-hander of Cincinnati. He shut down the Braves today easily. And Diaz's brother. Simple. Don't think it'll cost too much. This is what we wanted. Oh, my God. The Yankees got swept. The shoe still fits, but now it's on the other foot. So how about OMG? And how about MVP for Lindor, who should be talked about as the Subway Series guy with the most power? Gentlemen, I'm proud to be Mets fans with you. Have a great night.
How often do you get to say that? I'm proud to be a Met fan. I do like that idea with Cincinnati. I think the Reds are going to sell. And if you could add a lefty reliever and a righty reliever like Diaz and Moll, it would not be a bad addition. So I think that's a good idea. I think price is going to be the key on this. Chad Green in Toronto is a guy we've talked about. They've got to end up with a guy or two. Honestly, two relievers would be the dream. A left-handed reliever and then a guy who maybe pitches the seventh or eighth inning from the right side. So that would be ideal. Sean wanted to respond to something I said on the drive home, which was about the Mets not intentionally walking Aaron Judge, but pitching around him and forcing Jose Quintana to waste 14 pitches in his valuable pitch count just to walk Aaron Judge. Sean writes, you mentioned quickly on yesterday's pod after the Yankee game that the Mets wasted a lot of Quintana pitches by pitching to Judge instead of just putting up the fingers. I want to maybe give you a reason for this. What if that was the strategy? To make Judge think he'll never get anything to hit, to frustrate him that he's not going to get anything to hit, to play with his mind. And then comes the kicker in his final at-bat in the bottom of the ninth inning when his guard is down and he doesn't actually expect a strike. That's when he goes down looking, and that possibly was the game winner. So was it a long-term strategy? By the way, great idea. I think it makes a lot of sense. You know, Aaron Judge even admitted after the game he wanted to take a pitch because Diekman had missed so wildly with Juan Soto on 4 straight. But I don't think that's what Mendy was thinking. I think what they were thinking was, let's see if we can get Aaron Judge to chase. Let's see if we can frustrate him. Let's see if when he's up in the 4th inning, his aggressiveness gets the best of him. So it's a nice idea. I just don't think that was the case. Now, we have Atlanta coming up. This is on every level such a huge series. The Atlanta Braves right now are a broken team. And I have not said that about the Braves in a very, very long time. They are, I don't want to say similar to the Yankees in this regard, but they kind of are. They're 54-45. They have not played good baseball in a long time. They are dealing with a massive amount of injuries. Ozzie Albies just went down. They signed Whit Merrifield. He went down. And really, if you look at Atlanta this season, they had a very good April. They have been bad for 2.5 months, or bad may be too strong. They have been mediocre for 2.5 months. You know, they got off to this great start. They were in first place going into the month of May, and then they got swept in Los Angeles by the Dodgers, and their season has gone absolutely off the rails since then. I think they had one good stretch in the middle of June where they played well, but they're coming off of losing a bunch of games to Cincinnati, including one game that they canned. So they lost 2 games to Cincinnati. They lost 2 out of 3 to St. Louis. This is a team that you can take advantage of. This is a team that's not playing good baseball. And this is also monumental, not just because of the standings, not just because the Mets are a game and a half out, but sometimes I talk about tiebreakers and it annoys people. Oh, tiebreakers. The Mets and the Braves are 3-3 this year. Remember, the Mets won 2 out of 3 in Atlanta. The Braves won 2 out of 3 at City. The one game they won was the game-winning home run that was hit by Brandon Nimmo. So they've got 7 games left, including these 4 coming up at Citi Field. The tiebreaker, which could determine who is wild card number 1 or wild card number 2, could be on the line. The next time the Mets play the Braves, and boy, this is going to sound very eerie. God bless you. The next time the Mets play the Braves, the second to last series of the year in late September in Atlanta. Now, here's the good news. If the Mets could go out and win all 4 games against the Braves, they win the tiebreaker. And then we don't have to go into a series in late September where they just have to win 1 game to make sure they win the tiebreaker, like what happened 2 years ago. So this is a really big opportunity for this team because to me, it's not even about wild card number 1. Like, of course, I'd love for the Mets to be wild card number 1. Who wouldn't want games hosted at Citi Field in the postseason? To me, it's about giving yourself enough room ahead of enough teams so that if this team falters, they can still secure one of the 3 wild card spots. So right now, San Diego has gotten hot again. They've won 4 games in a row. They're 4 games above 500. The Diamondbacks are a few games above 500. The Pittsburgh Pirates have played well. They're a few games under 500. There are a lot of teams that are bunched in this mix. If Atlanta can come down and be bunched in this mix, you could potentially be talking about 6 teams battling for 3 spots. That's literally what we may be talking about. So it's important because you want to put yourself in as good a position to just get one of these 3 spots. So it's not even being obsessed with wild card spot number 1. It's just getting in. And I'll tell you what's been confusing the hell out of me recently is scoreboard watching, because there are so many teams that are in this mix right now. If you are going to accept that the Marlins, the Rockies, the Nationals, the Giants, the Cubs, and let's say the Reds are out of it, and it's tough to say the Reds, they've just won 2 in a row. They're 4 games under 500. You never know. But let's just say for the sake of this, they are kind of out of it. You're talking about Pittsburgh, Arizona, San Diego, the Cardinals, and the Mets separated by a game and a half. Think about how tight the National League is right now. So if you can bring Atlanta back into this, now you're talking about 6 teams for 3 spots. It's going to be Chris Sale in game number 1. The Mets have not seen him yet this season. Luis Severino is going to make the start for the Mets on Thursday night, which is pickleball night at Citi Field. They're giving away a pickleball paddle. I'm looking forward to that. And then Friday night, we get the return of Kodai Senga. No idea what to expect from him. No idea. I would have Adrian Hauser ready to maybe eat up some innings if Kodai can't go long. Charlie Morton is going to start the Friday night game. And then on Saturday, I think is going to be the day they're going to fill that 6th spot in the rotation. Now, I mentioned they could technically, if they wanted, push it off till Wednesday. They could move David Peterson up and have him start Saturday, and they could kind of move everybody up a little bit. But I don't think they're going to do that. So I think we're going to find out who this mystery guy is, and it may not be Budo right away. Maybe Budo down the line if they make some trades for relievers. But 4 games coming up against Atlanta, and then 3 against Minnesota, which isn't going to be easy. A team that's 11 games above 500. So a very tough stretch for this team. But for right now, how do you not smile? Beating that Yankee ass all over the South Bronx. Doesn't it feel good, Pete?
I loved LOLing Mets all over the Bronx. It was like unbelievable. It was honestly like there's very few moments in a baseball season I take a lot of joy and pride out of, but sweeping the Yankees in 4 games was honestly, that was like chef's kiss, right?
Chef's kiss. Just the second time in the history of the Subway Series, the New York Mets took a broom out on the New York Yankees, going 4-4-4. Thoughts? You can email us to ricob@gmail.com. You can leave us a voicemail, 725-222-8699. We will give you 2 Ricos coming up over the weekend, one in the middle of the series against Atlanta, and then one to wrap up the series. And we will give you a trade deadline preview. I'll make a list of a bunch of names, a bunch of potential targets, some relievers, some bats, and we'll go through the pluses and negatives on acquiring any of those guys. And, of course, if the Mets make a trade, within reason, we'll give you a Rico as soon as possible. I may be on the air, so you may have to hear it on WFAN. I have no idea. But either way, what a week. But now the war begins. The Atlanta Braves come to Citi Field. Thank you very much for listening, subscribing, and downloading Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.